Good morning. The committee meets today to consider the nomination of Lieutenant General Michael Kurilla for promotion to general and to be the next commander of U.S. Central Command. General, your nomination is well-deserved, and I thank you for your willingness to lead in this very important position. We welcome your wife, Mary Page, and daughter, Michelle, both of whom are here today, and we all welcome Sophie, who I'm sure is glued to a television set someplace watching her father. We thank them for their continued service to our nation. You have led most recently as the commanding general of the 18th Airborne Corps, an experience that will serve you well in this new role. Your career spans nearly 34 years with distinguished service across multiple theaters and command at every level of our nation's premier fighting forces. The country is fortunate to have leaders like yourself serving in uniform. If confirmed, the range of challenges you will need to address is significant. Centcom's geographic area of responsibility stretches from Northeast Africa across the Middle East to Central and South Asia, and the security challenges are similarly expansive. Perhaps most pressing is Iran's malign influence in the region. The United States' latest round of indirect negotiations to return to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, has seen progress, but Iran's ongoing nuclear development threatens to derail any agreement. Simultaneously, Iranian-linked groups continue to mount drone and rocket attacks in the region, including against bases in Iraq and Syria with a U.S. military presence. These threats are growing, as are drone and missile attacks by Iranian-linked Houthis against the Gulf states. During today's hearing, I would like to know your level of concern over rising tensions between the United States and Iran and how you advise responding to Iranian malign influence in the region. While the death of ISIS leader al-Qurayshi, U.S. strike last week dealt a blow to the organization, ISIS remains a threat. Last month, ISIS militants seized a prison facility in Syria where thousands of ISIS detainees are held, leading to a days-long standoff requiring U.S. and coalition air and ground support to the Syrian Defense Forces, Syrian Democratic Forces. Press reports indicate that up to 200 fighters may have escaped and hundreds of people were killed. If you are confirmed, you will be responsible for helping ensure the SDF and the Iraqi government have the capacity and support needed to address the threat from ISIS and properly detain these prisoners. Of particular emphasis for this committee is a reformation of how Centcom and the Defense Department respond to civilian casualty incidents. It must be noted that Centcom's approach to this issue in recent years has not been adequate, and the DoD Inspector General and independent studies have highlighted important areas for change. Our military goes to great lengths to avoid civilian casualties, but when tragic errors occur, we have an obligation to be transparent, take responsibility, and do everything we can to learn from those mistakes and prevent future mistakes. As such, General, I hope you will share what steps you would take to ensure Centcom improves its openness and transparency with this committee and the public. Finally, turning to Afghanistan, we have transitioned to an over-the-horizon counterterrorism posture to continue to respond to threats from the region using assets based outside Afghanistan. Our 20-year there largely achieved the goal of significantly degrading al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups, but the work is not finished. During testimony to this committee last October, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy assessed that ISIS-K and al-Qaeda have, in his words, the intent to conduct external operations, but neither has the ability to do so. To prevent terrorist groups from developing this ability, we must continue to bolster our over-the-horizon capabilities. With that in mind, I would ask that you share the most important lessons learned from your time in Afghanistan and how you would ensure Centcom can conduct optimal over-the-horizon activities. Again, thank you, General, for your continual willingness to serve, and I look forward to your testimony. Let me now recognize the ranking member, Senator Inhofe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Kurilla, for your willingness to continue your distinguished career. General Kurilla, when confirmed, you will take command of a region where terrorist groups increasingly threaten U.S. personnel, partners in the homeland. Due to the Biden administration's disastrous withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan last summer, Afghanistan is now back to pre-9/11 conditions. The Taliban controls the country, and it has already killed more than 100 former Afghan officials, soldiers, and coalition partners, according to the United Nations. The Haqqanis, which are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, have government positions, and ISIS-K, which killed 13 U.S. service members on August the 26th, is exploiting the vacuum that the Biden administration left behind. Elsewhere, the Iran-backed Houthis have launched deadly missile and drone attacks on Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates threaten U.S. forces and our partners. Last month, ISIS launched a series of new attacks in Syria and in Iraq. Last week's successful operation against ISIS leader shows that the counter-ISIS mission isn't over. I'm concerned that the things will get even worse if President Biden re-enters the failed 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which many of us here have urged him not to do. Iran will have received substantial sanctions relief. Iran will spend that windfall on terrorist proxies. That means more arms for Hezbollah, Hamas, and to attack Israel. More training for the Houthis to threaten our Arab friends, and more support for the Iraqi militias that target our personnel. Rejoining the Iran nuclear deal won't prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons capabilities. The deal's limitation expire in 2026, which is not that far off. So all of these threats in the Middle East are getting worse, but we also have to prioritize threats from the Chinese Communist Party and Russia right now, and both of those adversaries are heavily invested in competition in the Centcom. So here's what I hope you address today. What resources do you think we'll need to counter these regional threats? What role should our partners play, and how can we improve their capabilities? And perhaps most important, what can we do to ensure that our longtime regional partners stick with us in the escalating competition with China and Russia? And so, General Kurilla, you have served with great honor in this Centcom region. You're very familiar with it. You're the right guy to do this, and we look forward to winning together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. General Kurilla, your remarks, please.
Good morning, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Inhofe, and distinguished members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. It is an honor to appear before you today as the President's nominee to serve as the next Commander of United States Central Command. Today, as always, I'm humbled to serve the soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and Guardians who defend our nation at home and abroad every day. They are our nation's best. Joining me today is my amazing wife of 27 years, Mary Page. Throughout my career, Mary Page has been my best friend, partner, and enthusiastic advocate for our service members and their families. She is the daughter of a Vietnam veteran and has known from a very young age firsthand the challenges and hardships that face our military families. I have two wonderful daughters. My oldest, Michelle, flew in late last night from Massachusetts, where she is a senior at Harvard University, double majoring in government and English. My youngest daughter, Sophie, is a sophomore at Tufts University, studying biology, and has a lab at the New England Aquarium this afternoon, so she is watching from her dorm. My family has long understood that family readiness is a key component to operational readiness, and we are grateful for the service of all our military families. I'm grateful to the President, Secretary of Defense, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for their confidence in me, and to General Frank McKenzie's lifetime of service to the nation. I thank the Congress, and especially this committee, for its unwavering support of our military. This is a critical time for the 21 countries of Central Command. The United States faces a new era of strategic competition with China and Russia that is not confined to one geographical region and extends into the Centcom area of responsibility. The Middle East, Central, and South Asia remain complex and dynamic environments. Centcom remains a dangerous theater with its own internal threats to American security. As the United States rightfully prioritizes competition with China, we must remain engaged in the Middle East and Central and South Asia. We must be clear-eyed about the fact that the United States Central Command area of responsibility remains home to America's national interests. The region today presents a mixed picture. On one hand, there are signs of progress, such as normalization of Arab states with Israel, the defeat of the physical so-called caliphate, the ending of the Gulf Rift, and the continued support by longtime partners and allies. On the other hand, there are some vexing challenges: Iran's nuclear program, ballistic missile advancements, and its continued malign influence across the region. The Centcom theater is also burdened by civil war and humanitarian crisis. The area is home to 9 of the top 10 most dangerous violent extremist organizations, including Al-Qaeda and ISIS, which are both reconstituting. All of these ill trends are accelerated by water scarcity and food insecurity. China has significantly increased its investment and influence in the region, and Russia acts as a spoiler. If confirmed as the CENTCOM commander, I will protect American interests in the region with these challenges in mind. While we are no longer in Afghanistan, we must acknowledge and honor the sacrifice of the more than 1 million service members, civilians, partners, and allies who answered the call and did their duty during the war. And we must never forget the ultimate sacrifice of those who gave their last full measure of devotion on the battlefield. If confirmed, I will work hand in hand with our diplomats to ensure that diplomacy is in the lead while strengthening our relationship with military partners and allies. I will embrace technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and data-centric warfare to increase CENTCOM's competitive edge across all domains. If confirmed by this body, I look forward to working with this committee and Congress, the senior leadership of the Department of Defense, and our partners and allies. Furthermore, I will always remain transparent and candid with both Congress and this committee. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, General. As is required, there are a series of standard questions which you may respond to appropriately. Have you adhered to applicable laws and regulations governing conflicts of interest?
Yes, Senator.
Have you assumed any duties or taken any actions that would appear to presume the outcome of the confirmation process?
No, Senator.
Exercising our legislative and oversight responsibility makes it important that this committee, its subcommittees, and other appropriate committees of Congress receive testimony, briefings, reports, records, and other information from the executive branch on a timely basis. Do you agree, if confirmed, to appear and testify before this committee when requested?
Yes, Senator.
Do you agree, when asked before this committee, to give your personal views, even if your views differ from the administration?
Yes, Senator.
Do you agree to provide records, documents, and electronic communications in a timely manner when requested by this committee, its subcommittees, or other appropriate committees of Congress, and to consult with the requester regarding the basis for any good faith delay or denial in providing such records?
Yes, Senator.
Will you ensure that your staff complies with deadlines established by this committee for the production of reports, records, and other information, including timely responding to hearing questions for the record?
Yes, Senator.
Will you cooperate in providing witnesses and briefers in response to congressional requests?
Yes, Senator.
Will those witnesses and briefers be protected from reprisal for their testimony or briefings?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you very much, General. Again, let me commend you for your service to the nation and the service of your family. We spoke before about the continuing crisis in Afghanistan and looking forward to the steps we have to take. There is, as you recognize, a humanitarian crisis that is becoming more and more severe each moment. There is the persistent threat of Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K and other terrorist groups. What do you see as the challenges in Afghanistan and the surrounding region, and can we cope with them over the horizon?
Senator, as you identified, one of the challenges is the threat to the homeland from Al-Qaeda and ISIS-K. They are reconstituting. The Taliban has not renounced Al-Qaeda. ISIS-K, with the release of the prisoners both from the Bagram prison and Pul-Sharki, are in the process of reconstituting. While they have aspirations to attack the homeland, They do not have the capability yet. Additionally, we have the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. I believe there are opportunities in the future of ways that we can work with perhaps the World Food Program and others in the region to help alleviate some of that burden on the humanitarian crisis.
Now, in our regional response, we have to consider the position of Pakistan. They have been a very complicated partner and sometimes not a partner. Do you have any comments on that relationship and what you would like to do to improve it?
Senator, we have not always seen eye to eye with Pakistan, but I do think we have a shared interest in regional stability and countering violent extremist organizations. One of the most violent is Taliban Pakistani, the TTP, which directly threatens Pakistan. Also, the humanitarian crisis inside of Afghanistan threatens the migrants to push into, and refugees to push into Pakistan. So I think there's potentially some shared interest that we can work with them on counter VEOs and the humanitarian crisis.
Well, thank you. Turning to Iran, as both myself and the ranking member pointed out, it presents a very, very serious challenge. There are talks underway to try to revive the JCPOA, but it's uncertain if that will happen. Their malign activities, both directly and through proxies like the Houthis, are causing concern, especially attacks recently against the United Arab Emirates. Can you give us an idea of how you would approach this problem as you take command?
Senator, Iran is the #1 destabilizing factor in the Middle East right now with their malign behavior. I think going through our partners and allies and strengthening those with a united front from all the partners and allies is the best way to confront them. The U.S. policy of Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. I believe that any enforceable agreement should make sure that they do not get a nuclear weapon.
Thank you. And you also said in the advanced policy questions and in your testimony that we must invest in artificial intelligence and machine learning platforms and programs to increase our ability to detect, defend, and respond to conventional Iranian military capabilities. Can you sketch very quickly what you would attempt to do?
So, Senator, right now in the 18th Airborne Corps, when James McConville, General McConville, the Chief of Staff of the Army, charged the 18th Corps to lead an artificial intelligence become an AI-enabled corps, we have taken a four-prong approach to that with the culture, data literacy, data governance management, and our infrastructure, i.e. cloud computing and cloud computing on the edge. And then we take that and we do a quarterly exercise that uses artificial intelligence for target detection every quarter. From all 6 services participate. The last exercise had over 40 aircraft, and to include the Navy, participating with the Maritime Operations Center. And it culminated in a Marine F-35 dropping a live 1,000-pound bomb on an artificially intelligence-derived grid that was 1 meter off from the surveyed grid. And we do these exercises quarterly to improve the capability of the targeting ability of the Corps. I would look to take that, if confirmed, down to Centcom and expound upon that.
And would that also help us with our issues regarding over-the-horizon sort of suppression of terrorists in Afghanistan?
Senator, it has capabilities for both counterterrorism as well.
Well, thank you very much, General. I am very confident that you will be confirmed and confident you will lead with distinction.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the past year, Iran and its proxies have escalated their regional aggression. Hamas launched more than 4,300 rockets at Israel during the May 2021 conflict. The Houthis have increased their attacks on civilian targets in Saudi Arabia, and the UAE and the Iran-backed militias in Iraq routinely target U.S. personnel, property, and partners. All of this happened while the Biden administration is focusing on returning to the flawed Iran deal, which could provide billions of dollars in sanctions relief for the Iranian regime. General Kurilla, based on what you've observed of Iran in the past, would you expect Iran to spend at least some of that sanctions relief on its terrorist proxies? And if so, how would this affect the security of our forces in the Centcom region?
Senator, there is a risk with sanctions relief that Iran would use some of that money to support its proxies and terrorism in the region. And if they did, it could increase risk to our forces in the region.
Yeah. And General Kurilla, I've had visit for many times our friend Masoud Barzani in Erbil many times over the years. The Iraqi Kurds are among our most reliable partners in the region, and I believe it's important to ensure continued and reliable support to our Kurdish friends in coordination with the Iraqi government. Do you agree that the continued and reliable support to the Kurdish Peshmerga would enhance our partnership and advance our mutual interest in the region? And can you share some insight on the value of our partnership with the Kurds based on your personal experience? Because you've had that personal experience.
Senator, I've worked with our Kurdish partners and found them to be very reliable and very capable. I've worked with them since 2004 on my first tour in Iraq, and as recently as the counter-ISIS fight up in 2014. I have found them to be an incredibly capable and reliable partner.
Yes. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Inhofe. Senator Shaheen, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't realize we were still going in seniority order, so I appreciate that, and congratulations. Lieutenant.
You have a cheering from the upper deck.
Yes. Well, General Kurilla, thank you for being here. Congratulations to you and your family on your nomination. We very much appreciate your willingness to serve. And I understand that you're actually leaving directly from this hearing to be part of the task force overseeing the deployment to reinforce our NATO allies because of Russia's buildup on the Ukrainian and Belarusian border. I wonder what you consider to be the biggest challenge of that deployment.
So, Senator, right now we are in the process of deploying, and yes, I will be leaving right after the hearing to fly over to be continued part of that deployment. I think the challenge is obviously moving transatlantic with the number of forces we have. Our mission over there is to assure our NATO allies and deter Russian aggression against our NATO allies.
And to what extent do you think Putin is hoping for an incident along the border to give him an excuse to go into Ukraine?
Senator, I could not begin to speak for Putin's thoughts, but I do know I am very concerned about a Russian invasion into Ukraine.
Thank you. I want to switch to what will be part of your AOR as CENTCOM commander. And one of the things that I'm very concerned about is what's happening in the ISIS detainee camps in Syria. The one at Al-Hol has 60,000 family members. It's become a hotbed for potential radicalization of those family members there. Can you talk about what the strategy ought to be to address those detainee camps? And I know because you've worked with the SDF that they have stated that they're not able to assume long-term responsibility for those detainees in those camps. So what should we be doing to address that?
Senator, I believe that there should be a whole-of-government approach and an international effort to both assist the SDF on the repatriation of some of these detainees. It's approximately 10,000 ISIS detainees at about 24 different detention facilities. That is an ISIS army in waiting. We saw that in Hasaka when they attacked the prison. We also have, as you noted, 60,000 family members. Over 80% are children, women and children in the Al-Hol camp. My concern there is the indoctrination that is happening there, and so there must be a whole-of-government approach and an international effort to support the SDF on this.
And this committee actually, as part of the Defense Authorization Bill last year, passed a requirement to establish a detainee coordinator to help address how we respond in those camps and how we repatriate some of the detainees. Are you aware of that position, and Do you think that would be helpful?
Senator, I do think that would be helpful.
Thank you. Hopefully someone is listening to your testimony. I want to go to Iraq because we've seen a series of bomb and grenade attacks taking place over the last week in Baghdad. And it's assumed that Iranian-backed militias are responsible for these incidents. So how can we better hold Iran accountable for these kinds of attacks and ensure that our personnel and those Iraqis defending their country are protected?
Senator, I believe the key is that we have to make sure that we expose the Iranian malign behavior. I have found that any time Iran's hand behind this is exposed, it is helpful.
Thank you. There was a recent report on a special operations directed strike targeting components of the Tabika Dam in Syria, despite the dam being on the no-strike list. It's not clear to me how this happened. I haven't seen any reports investigating that, but will you commit to investigating what happened here and to reporting the results to Congress?
Senator, I will if confirmed.
Thank you. And finally, we have a law called the Women, Peace, and Security Act that is designed to try and ensure that women are involved in our operations and particularly in conflict areas. So can you talk a little bit about how you see that law working in your area of responsibility and what we should be doing and how it could be helpful to what's happening in the Central Command?
Senator, the Women and Security Act, Peace and Security Act of 2017, if confirmed, that is an area I would look to see how is Centcom employing that law. I think anytime you have women involved in conflict resolution and helping, insisting in the delivery and relief of relief, it is a good thing. So I think if confirmed, I would have to take a look at how that is being implemented.
Well, thank you. I look forward to working with you on that and being helpful in any way I can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Wicker, please.
General, I think there's widespread agreement that you're the right man for the job. We need to get you back to your base and get you involved in that deployment. I'm almost tempted to yield back my time so you can get on about that, but I'm not quite convinced that I should do that. Let me ask you about money. We're now spending money for the Pentagon that was decided more than a year ago. And that's because of our failure to have a defense appropriation bill. We're about to do another continuing resolution. People in this town, from the administration really to DOD to the Congress, seem to sort of view this as an inconvenience and a little bit of a lapse. How big of a problem is this? And I've got several questions, but is this merely an inconvenience, or is Centcom going to really take a hit because we can't do our job?
Senator, I can't speak on behalf of Centcom, but I can tell you my personal experience in 18th Airborne Corps. When we have prolonged CRs, it affects readiness. It affects our ability to train. It affects our combat training centers, our rotor wing flight hours, and I have 2 Armor Brigade combat teams in the 18th Airborne Corps. They're very expensive to operate. It affects modernization. It can disrupt modernization. I have an Armor Brigade combat team that's in a year-long modernization window. They'll emerge as the most modernized Armor Brigade combat team in the Army. CRs can disrupt that. I don't know the impact if it was to take it all the way out through the year. And then I have a second one that's Armor Brigade combat team that's going in this summer. And lastly, it can affect quality of life. It stops the prevention of new starts, such as military construction for barracks, motor pools, and child development centers.
Okay, well, maybe I may be speaking to the choir about this in this room, but it seems so when we bring this up, and any number of members of this committee bring it up, people nod and agree with you, and yet we're just going to be quite relaxed next week about going to another continuing resolution. Let me ask you about the stands that were formerly Soviet Republic, and I'm looking at the map here, General, and I see Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan, and then the massive geographic area of Kazakhstan, which covers 5 time zones. why are they important to us in the United States? And what difference did it make in their leadership seeing how we left Afghanistan and what I view as a major debacle?
Senator, they're very important. That is an area also that I think we compete with Russia and China. I think with the departure from Afghanistan, there is some security interests that we share with them, and that is in terms of those that border on Afghanistan, particularly Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. I think we have shared interest on the VEOs and areas that we could potentially partnership with them on the border security to prevent the expansion of the VEOs from coming into their area.
But you haven't started this job yet, but you're anticipating that you will. Has the leadership of these 5 former Soviet republics acted differently after seeing what happened last August in Kabul?
Senator, I am not sure, and if confirmed, that is an area that I would take a hard look at.
If Russia invades Ukraine, how will that, in your judgment, affect how these 5 former Soviet republics view their neighbor to the north in the United States?
Senator, I believe they would have some concerns with Russia invading Ukraine, as that would look to expand potentially their former, one of their former locations.
Thank you. Well, good luck to you, and I'm going to yield you a whole 30 seconds to get back and get that deployment going.
Thank you, Senator.
Yield back.
Thank you, Senator Wicker. Senator Arona, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General, for your service. You have a lot of experience and your AOR. I start the questioning of all nominees to any positions in any of the committees I sit on, and these are the following 2 questions that I ask all nominees. Since you became a legal adult, have you ever made unwanted requests for sexual favors or committed any verbal or physical harassment or assault of a sexual nature?
No, Senator.
Have you ever faced discipline or entered into a settlement related to this kind of conduct?
No, Senator.
General, I am very concerned, along with other members of this committee, very concerned about the ongoing issue of the poor treatment of Afghan women and girls, especially since our withdrawal and the Taliban's return to power. Recently, President Biden appointed Rina Amiri as U.S. Special Envoy for Afghan women, girls, and human rights to spearhead an interagency effort to advance the rights of Afghan women and girls. As Commander of Central Command, what do you see your role in supporting Ms. Amiri, USAID, and other agencies in supporting the rights of Afghan women and girls?
Senator, if confirmed, that is an area where I would look at to analyze how Centcom can be part of a whole-of-government approach.
I like the fact that you have used whole of government in your response to a number of questions, and I think that is a very good idea because whole of government means, I would say, the active involvement of the State Department and also any of our allies. So, I'd be interested, if confirmed, how you will proceed in this area, since the fate of Afghan women and girls is something that weighs very heavily on a number of us, and our challenges in getting or rescuing many of them out of the country remains very difficult. You mentioned Iran as being the #1 destabilizing actor in the Middle East. And again, with the Iran a whole-of-government approach and how to contain their malign activities. And you said that when Iranian malign behavior is exposed, it's helpful. Can you just describe what you consider an example of Iran's malign behavior, which it would be helpful to expose, and what do you mean by it is helpful to expose such behavior?
Senator, when we see the Iran proxies, and there's Iranian-aligned militia groups that are either firing rockets at our embassy in Iraq, they're firing at our troops inside of Syria. They support the Houthis, and they're providing that technology to them to fire ballistic missiles into the UAE and into Saudi Arabia. When we expose the Iranian hand behind that, It causes them to react,
It causes who to react?
the Iranians to react.
How would they react? Would they pull back?
Ma'am,
their
they
support?
try and hide their behavior, and it can cause them to not take action for a period of time. That is my experience when I was down at Centcom.
You were asked some questions regarding the JCPOA. Under President Biden joined U.S. allies France, Germany, and the UK and Ireland in a statement noting that a return to the JCPOA would result in both in sanctions lifting, allowing for enhanced regional partnerships, and a reduced risk of a nuclear crisis that would derail regional diplomacy. What are your thoughts on a return to the JCPOA, and would rejoining the agreement be a positive step in containing Iran's nuclear ambitions? As far as I'm concerned, there was no question that our membership and the JCPOA enabled us to really track what Iran was doing. Would a return to JCPOA really greatly enhance efforts to contain Iran's nuclear ambitions?
Senator, I'm not aware of the exact details of the ongoing negotiations, but I am supportive of any enforceable agreement that limits Tehran's ability to gain nuclear weapons.
I think that a large part of that would be to have an agreement such as the JCPOA, and unfortunately, that is not where we are. If confirmed, how do you plan to work with partners and allies to confront the challenges presented by Iran?
Senator, if confirmed, I will have to take a hard look at the partners and allies. Each one of them bring different capabilities. I think there is some opportunities in the integrated air and missile defense, particularly with Israel now under the Centcom area of responsibility, that they can do some partnerships in terms of increasing the capability.
Well, thank you. I'd say that Israel would be a major partner in that effort. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Rona. Senator Fisher, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, General, to you and your family, and thank you, sir, for your many years of service to this country. General, this morning we read in the Washington Post about an Army review of the Afghanistan drawdown. The report highlights the extent to which the Biden administration's poor planning forced our service members into an incredibly dangerous and an incredibly chaotic situation during that evacuation. I know that you are not responsible for this report, but if confirmed, do I have your word that if future reports like this are completed, that this committee will learn about them from you and not from the morning paper?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. I wouldn't think that members of this committee would have to make a FOIA request in order to learn information that should be brought forward in a positive way to keep us informed so that we can perform our oversight responsibilities. General, based on your prior experience that you've had in the region, your knowledge of the region, what do you assess to be the most significant challenges for Centcom to carry out an over-the-horizon counterterrorism strategy in Afghanistan?
Senator, over-the-horizon capability is extremely difficult, but not impossible. I think the biggest challenge for Afghanistan is that it is a landlocked country. We rely on another nation for an air line of communication to be able to enter Afghanistan. The distances required to fly ISR is great. We spend approximately 2/3 of the time flying there and getting back versus over the target. So it is resource intensive to be able to do the finding and then the fixing and the finishing of those targets that you're going after. I think we need to reinvest in a lot of our intelligence capabilities, our human intelligence capability that was lost during the withdrawal.
Do you anticipate that we will have more success in the future on being able to find those partners on the ground?
Senator, if confirmed, I will need to make an assessment of that.
Do you know of any ongoing conversations about basing agreements with neighboring countries that would be helpful to us in being able to do the over-the-horizon CT?
Senator, I'm not aware of any detailed discussions going on, but I know that there are discussions happening right now that could ease the distances that are required.
I would hope if you do, you would contact us so that we can keep up to date on the progress or lack thereof in this regard, because it is so vital to our commitment that we have and in Afghanistan and the needs that we have to meet in Afghanistan. I hope that you will do that review process. We heard from Secretary Call in October that ISIS-K could generate the capability to attack our homeland by April. That's not too far away from today. And if there needs to be a change in strategy, if Centcom needs to be resourced differently, I would hope that you would bring that to our attention as well.
Senator, I will.
Thank you. When you were speaking about partners and allies and our need for partners and allies, especially in dealing with Iran and their proxies, are there specific ways that you feel that we could help our partners defend themselves with regard to missile and drone attacks?
Senator, I believe that's probably the area with some of the greatest opportunity in terms of working towards an integrated air and missile defense. The addition of Israel to the AOR, I think, will help with that. I think there are areas also in the terms of cyber defense. We are collectively stronger together when we work together. So there are areas there that each one brings a unique capabilities in terms of that.
From your comments, I would imagine that you would then be a strong advocate for providing Israel with the defensive means that they need.
Senator, I am.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Fisher. Now via WebEx, let me recognize Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. In recent years, Beijing has elevated the Middle East strategic significance by building commercial ports in Pakistan and beginning another port project in UAE, which is halted by U.S. pressure. With China relying on the Persian Gulf for nearly half its energy supply, do you view countering the expansion of China's Belt and Road Initiative in the Centcom area of responsibility as a fundamental priority?
Senator, I do. Right now, 18 of 21 countries in the Centcom AOR have signed agreements, strategic agreements for Belt and Road initiatives with China. China has increased their spending 360% in the Middle East. So I believe it is of great concern. And what we have to do is expose their predatory practices where they treat every country as a client or a customer, where we deal in relationships and we are partners and allies.
So how does countering China in the region balance against some of our other counterterrorism commitments with regional partners?
Senator, I believe we can do both.
Mm-hmm. Reports last year emerged that Saudi Arabia purchased ballistic missiles from China while also manufacturing its own ballistic weapons using Chinese technology. Are you concerned that China is forging technological relationships with countries such as Saudi Arabia to further enhance the ballistic missile capabilities of regional actors? Also, do you have a broader concern that our traditional allies in Centcom should be shifting towards China as we potentially focus on other regions across the globe?
Senator, I am very concerned with China's military involvement as well in terms of these agreements. 3 of the top purchasers of their UAVs are out of the Middle East. The technological agreements they have with Huawei, 5 major Middle Eastern countries have also come into agreements with them, so I'm very concerned with that.
And you will give us any guidance to the extent you need additional resources or authorities to address those concerns?
Senator, I would not hesitate to do that.
Thank you. A recent NDAA-directed RAND study pointed out numerous shortcomings in the DoD's investigation and response to civilian casualties. It concluded a number of recommendations to improve DoD's internal and external process conducting tactical strikes. One specific issue RAND highlighted is the need for the Department of Defense to better engage with non-governmental organizations to develop a better situational assessment for civilian casualty incidents. If confirmed, will you continue to prioritize effective CIVCAS response within your command? And do we have your commitment that Centcom will improve and regularly engage with NGOs on this issue?
Senator, I do.
Thank you. My last question, as the military shifts focus to great power competition, low-intensity conflicts in the Middle East may lose significant resources. Can you discuss how force planning concepts like dynamic force employment, that is the ability to rapidly shift key U.S. military assets from one theater to the other, will allow the U.S. to divert resources away from Centcom to meet the challenges faced by near-peer competitors if necessary?
Senator, that is going to have to be, if confirmed, I'd have to make an assessment of the impact of those DFEs. The challenge with counterterrorism efforts are that they do take time to develop the targets. It's finding the targets and fixing them. Dynamic force employment could come in for a finish potentially, but the effort goes into the finding and the fixing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, thank you for your support for 10th Mountain up in Fort Drum, part of 18th Airborne Corps.
My pleasure and privilege.
Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Kurilla, first of all, I did enjoy our visit in my office, and I can share with you that I do believe that you're the right man for the job right now, and I look forward to supporting your nomination. I would like to explore a little bit along the lines that Senator Fisher began with regard to the over-the-horizon capabilities. I think this is something that we've got to be able to explain in terms of the challenges here a little bit better. One item that we talked about was literally the number of units necessary to maintain surveillance over a particular area. Would you just take just a minute or so and dive in a little bit deeper with regards to the challenges of over-the-horizon capabilities that we face with regard to Afghanistan?
Yes, Senator. So just using an MQ-9 Reaper as an example, you have the normal ones in the extended range can go up to 30 hours of endurance. If it's taking you 10 hours to get to a target and 10 hours to fly back, to be able to keep a single sensor over that target, you're going to have 2.5 MQ-9s, one taking off every 10 hours, to be able to be over the target for just one sensor to be able to develop that target. In Afghanistan, when we were doing operations, sometimes I would have up to 12 sensors on a target to be able to follow individuals, develop the target, and it's also used in civilian casualty mitigation because you're watching all the approaches to that target when you're taking a strike. So it can be very resource intensive.
I think that's the critical part here is when we talk about over-the-horizon capabilities, it is extremely equipment intensive, and it will take a huge amount of resources in order to be successful in the Afghan region. Your background is one of developing and moving ahead with regards to technologies. With regard to the 18th Airborne Corps, would you share a little bit about the challenges that you found in terms of bringing in and using the newest technology, including the threats of cybersecurity or cyber attacks, what you found you needed to do in order to keep the team up to speed, and talk a little bit just about with regard to artificial intelligence, the fact that this is not something in the future, but rather something that we are faced with right now.
Senator, I believe it's the next revolution in military affairs. I find the biggest challenge is actually the data literacy and the education of our current force, and particularly with kind of the older generation of us. It's really our younger generation does get a lot of this. The challenge you have is being able to then take this and how do you fight with artificial intelligence? What we have discovered is that the human must be in the loop. An individual human augmented by artificial intelligence is far more effective than just artificial intelligence on its own right now. We do these quarterly exercises called Scarlet Dragon. Every quarter we'll bring in all 6 services, and we go through the process of how can we increase the scale and scope of targeting against a near peer in a large-scale combat operation. And we have found that we were able to exponentially increase that capability to sort through hundreds of targets to pick the right targets to be able to strike, moving it machine to machine and directly to an aircraft.
Now let's integrate that with regard to the AOR that you're going to be responsible for. You now have Israel as a part of this AOR. They're an ally. They have significant capabilities. As you move forward, do you see some real opportunities here to coordinate with Israel with regard to cybersecurity, AI, and so forth in an integrated defense program?
Senator, I think there's tremendous opportunities to partner with not just Israel, but with all of the partners in the region in terms of that.
Can you talk a little bit about with regard to Iran, the threats that you see with regard to cybersecurity threats emanating from Iran?
Senator, Iran has a very capable offensive cyber capability. We see that playing out in the Centcom region right now. So I think the areas that we can also work on is hardening our cyber defenses of our partners in the region.
They talk about Iran having access to ransomware, and as such, since it's normally used by criminals, it's one way in which they can perhaps hide some of their activities. Would you agree that Iran is a threat with regard to ransomware at this time?
Senator, I do agree.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my 10 seconds. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Senator Rounds. Now let me recognize via WebEx Senator King.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to compliment our colleague, Senator Gillibrand. I thought her questions on China and China's growing influence in the region were very perceptive and important, and something that we often don't think much about. General, it's hard to ever utter the phrase cooperation and Taliban in the same sentence, but we have a common enemy in ISIS-K. The Taliban doesn't like them. We don't like them. They're a danger to us. They're a danger to them. Is there an opportunity for developing a kind of compartmented relationship, if you will, with the Taliban with regard to ISIS-K? We've been able to use the ALOC through Pakistan for ISR, but there has been no kinetic strike yet. And there's some question as to what effect that would have on the relationship to the Taliban and Pakistan. The short question is there room for some relationship with the Taliban that can help us and help them with the problem of ISIS-K?
Senator, if confirmed, that is an area that I would have to do a deep study on. But I do think, in my personal opinion, there are pragmatic instances where we could come together going after ISIS-K based on the threat to the homeland.
Well, I would hope so, because, as I say, the old saying is that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So there may be an opportunity there to deal with the threat of ISIS-K, which I think is very significant and growing. How do we assist with the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan without at the same time assisting the Taliban? Are there avenues to provide support that we can avail ourselves of that don't shore up the Taliban regime?
Senator, I believe the most important thing we need to make sure that it is transparent and it does not fall into the hands of the Taliban and is used as that they can weaponize it. I think an opportunity potentially exists with the UN food program. They're a very transparent and accountable organization to be able to provide funding for relief. I also think working with Pakistan, they have a shared interest in that because of the refugees that are coming out of Afghanistan right now into Pakistan.
Moving to Iraq, there appears in recent years, or in the last year or so, a decline of Iran's influence in Iraq with Sadr and with some of the militias. How do you assess the situation in Iraq? Is there an opportunity for us to leave there, or should we have to maintain a presence in order to offset Iran's influence?
Senator, we're in Iraq right now for the enduring defeat of ISIS and to maintain our strategic relationship with the government of Iraq. I think that the partnership that we have with them on the enduring defeat of ISIS is very important. The Iraqi security forces do have a very capable force, but it is not, it can still grow and needs to develop so that it is self-sustaining and for being able to go after ISIS.
And as you mentioned earlier, one of our key allies there are the Iraqi Kurds, which have been reliable and capable allies throughout this entire process in the Middle East.
Senator, I've worked a lot with the Kurds, and they are a very capable and reliable partner.
How do you assess the addition of Israel, the moving of Israel from EUCOM to CENTCOM in terms of your job and the ability to deal with the Middle East as a coherent entity?
Senator, I think there is significant opportunity with the addition of Israel. It starts with the Abraham Accords, the normalization of relationships between Israel and Arab nations. We have both Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates, and that has caused them to start talking. And when you're talking, you're lowering the temperature in the room. There is talk of security cooperation as well, and I think that's only a good thing.
Finally, in your military judgment, we've been having discussions about the JCPOA, whether to re-enter, and everybody's committed to Iran not achieving a nuclear weapon. In the absence of diplomacy or some kind of enforceable agreement, what are the military options realistically for eliminating Iran's nuclear capability?
Senator, in my current job, I'm not aware of the current military options. My only concern would be that you can never take away the intellectual knowledge that they have on how to increase their nuclear capability, and then the reaction that Iran would have of any strike on them.
And the conclusion from that is that a military strike would not, you can't bomb knowledge, and
Senator King, we cannot hear you,
certainly
and
heighten
your time has
their
expired.
rules.
So with your permission,
Thank you.
let me recognize Senator Cotton. Thank you.
General, welcome to the committee. Congratulations on your nomination, this very important post, another long and illustrious post that you've held over your distinguished career. Thank you for your service to our nation. We have had a lot of talk about Iran this morning at the committee, in part because Iran is the worst country in your region. They're the world's worst sponsor of state terrorism. They're behind almost every proxy war in the region, to say nothing of what they're doing to try to obtain nuclear weapons. If it becomes clear that Iran is actively pursuing a nuclear weapon, does Central Command have the resources necessary should the Commander-in-Chief, President Biden, direct a military strike against Iran?
Senator, if confirmed, I would have to look at the mission and the resources required, and I would come back to the chairman and the secretary if additional resources were required.
Can you commit that you will do that and that you'll give your best professional military judgment about what resources would be needed to carry out such a mission?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. Senator King just spoke about Iran getting a nuclear weapon and how we all think that Iran should not have a nuclear weapon, and that was what President Obama frequently said in 2015 in defending the nuclear deal, that he would not allow Iran to obtain the bomb. I think President Biden has said something similar. That leaves open the possibility that we would allow Iran to get right up to the threshold of getting a nuclear weapon, proverbial turn of the screwdriver, if you will, the way a country like Japan is today. I mean, people worry about Japan being one step away from a nuclear weapon because Japan is not run by a bunch of crazed theocrats. It may be one thing to say the United States could live with an Iran that's one turn of the screwdriver away from getting a nuclear weapon. Can a country like Israel live under those circumstances, though? Or what about Saudi Arabia or the other Arab nations in the region?
Senator, my concern would be Iran being a nuclear threshold state, that it could be very destabilizing to the region and cause others to attempt to work on their defense.
Even if they don't have a nuclear weapon and don't have a demonstrated capability, if they are simply a nuclear threshold state, it would embolden them that much more. That's your point?
Yes, Senator.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. One incredibly emboldened action I've seen over the last couple months is that Iran's proxies in Yemen are firing ballistic missiles and one-way drones into the Emirates. And some of those are attacking bases where we have American troops. What do you make of this incredibly provocative and escalatory action coming out of Iran's Yemeni proxies?
Senator, that's an example of Iranian malign behavior and aggressive behavior from their proxies in the region.
Why do you think, so they've been doing that in Saudi Arabia, in southwestern and western Saudi Arabia for a few years. Why do you think in the last couple of months those proxies in Yemen are now firing those missiles and drones all the way into the Emirates?
Senator, my personal opinion is part of that is because of the advances that the Giants Brigade down in Yemen took back areas like Al Shabwa province from the Houthis, and that is their reaction back to the UAE. But I would have to have, if confirmed, do a deeper study on that.
What would you do if you were sitting in Abu Dhabi and you had missiles and drones flying into your territory, potentially hitting your bases or hitting the Burj Khalifa?
Senator, if I'm the CENTCOM commander with forces there, I would use the Patriots and the THAAD systems that we have in the theater to shoot them down.
Do you think we currently have enough of those systems in the region to protect not only our allies, but in this case, again, it was our troops, our troops at bases in the Emirates?
Senator, I think that one of the advances that we can look at doing is increasing the integrated air and missile defense in the region of our partners and allies to contribute to make sure that they are all integrated.
I mean, based on the threat we've seen coming out of Yemen in these last couple of months, I think it's going to be one of the most urgent priorities you face. It's both making sure that we have the resources we need, but also working with our partners to help them. Because I don't think, as Iran is emboldened, I don't think this threat is going to decrease. I think it's only going to increase. And again, we're just talking about it coming out of Yemen, not other places where they're supplying proxies with similar missiles or drones. One final point. I kind of get irritated when I see reports about F-22s and F-35s bombing insurgencies, or, you know, in 2017, I think we bombed a drug factory with an F-22. Can we do a better job about not using advanced fifth-generation aircraft to bomb low-threat first-generation targets?
Senator, as a military person, if that is the only asset available, I would use that asset.
I get that. I'd like to see better asset planning, though. So those aircraft are directed towards countries like China with advanced air defenses and fifth-generation fighters themselves, and older generation aircraft are directed against ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Sure.
One final question. There's also been a lot of talk about the over-the-horizon strike capacity in Afghanistan. I think that would be better termed over-the-rainbow strike capacity. How could we possibly be striking into Afghanistan without intelligence on the ground and when we're completely beholden to Pakistan for giving access to their airspace? It's a big problem, isn't it?
Senator, it's a challenge.
All right. Good luck trying to conquer that challenge. We need you to.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Congratulations again.
Thank you, Senator Cotton. Now let me recognize Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. General, welcome to the committee, and thank you for your service. Thanks for talking to me the other day, as we did on the phone, and answering my questions as insightfully and forthrightly as you're doing here at the committee. And I look forward to visiting with you during your service in Centcom. As you and I discussed, I'm very deeply concerned, in fact, frustrated and even angry about the slow pace of the evacuation of at-risk Afghan allies and potentially Americans from Afghanistan. We have been dwelling in this committee hearing mostly on the use of American power, our military power, but our credibility and power around the world depend on our keeping our word. We have given our word to the translators and interpreters and guards and drivers and our credibility around the world and our credibility in the next struggle. Two of my sons have served. One was an infantry officer, a Marine Corps officer in Afghanistan. It took him 2 years to bring over his interpreter. The other was a Navy SEAL. And I just want to say how grateful I am to the veterans group for their support in the continuing effort to enable those at-risk Afghan allies to come to this country. But I've been frustrated by, frankly, our State Department's seeming reluctance to be as engaged as it should in this effort. And a number of us, colleagues, have joined Senator Graham, Senator Ernst, myself, Senator Cardin in a measure called Honor Our Commitment, which would try to enable more of those at-risk Afghan allies to come here. Let me ask you, what capacity do you think Centcom has to facilitate the continued evacuation of the Afghan allies who remain at risk in that country. I know it's winter there as it is here. The airport has failings, but we're America. We can fly in and out of that airport. Can Centcom play a role in facilitating the evacuation of those at-risk Afghan allies if asked to do so?